Fine, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so we'll all go.
Are we
So,
sharing screen?
not yet. We've still got a few bits and pieces to do. Cool. All right, everyone, welcome. This is being held, for me at least, in the supper room at the Waihinga Centre. It is a public meeting. Due to COVID restrictions, members of the public will not be permitted in the venue, and the meeting will be live streamed and will be available on our YouTube channel. All members participating via video conference will count for the purposes of the meeting quorum in accordance with clause 25B of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act 2002. So, Alistair, would you like to, Councillor Plym, would you like to read the affirmation?
We pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skill, wisdom and judgment throughout discussions and deliberations ahead of us today in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of the South Wairarapa district at large. We commit individually and as a council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the vision and values we have adopted in our long-term plan strategic document in order to energise, unify and enrich our district.
Thank you, Councillor Plymouth. Apologies, I have an apology from Councillor Pip Maynard. Do we have any other apologies? It looks like we have a full meeting. So do we have a mover to accept this apology? Councillor Colenso, seconded Councillor Hay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. Cool. Are there any conflicts of interest? No? Good. Acknowledgements and tributes. Councillor Hay.
I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of our colleague, Councillor Pip Maynard's father, Philip Maynard, who passed away on Saturday. He was a very well-loved and respected member of the community, and our thoughts and wishes are with both our elected members, Mel and her sister Pip, and of course the Cynthia and Nathan and the wider whānau. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other acknowledgements? Tributes, which is something we don't usually see many of, but as a tribute, I'd like to congratulate the Wairarapa Racing Club Te Nikau for winning the Supreme Award at the Wairarapa Business Awards for 2021. So congratulations to them. It's nice to see that being in the South Wairarapa. We have no public participation. So we'll move on to decision reports and on to B1, which is adoption of the spatial plan growth areas. So do we have a mover to receive the adoption of the spatial plan growth area report? Councillor Plymouth, seconded Councillor Fox. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. Fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Kendall and Russell to give us a presentation. There will be questions, and I know there are some comments from our workshop or our meetings previously, which we will get to. But if we could have a look at the presentation and then have questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, yeah, good opportunity for us to present to you, councillors, and for many of you, it'll be a refresh of where we got to through results of the submission process, deliberations, and some active workshop thinking as part of the deliberations. Kendall's gone to the good work of compiling 26 slides, so we'll take you through those. There is the initial part is background to bring you so that we are conveying the full background and how we've got to this point, as well as looking at individual towns. So we'll do that. And as the Mayor says, we'll tackle questions later in the presentation.
Try to get this.
just by way of introduction and repurposing. We're here to adopt the spatial plan residential growth areas for Featherston, Martinborough and Greytown. It's the residential areas plus our spatial plan and our strategic framework diagram. So it's an all-in-one capture of what we've done and how we've done it. Residential growth options have been assessed carefully and supported by related work, such as the ongoing big work of Wellington Regional Growth Framework, and they're trucking on with that with their Y-shaped pattern of development. We've done earlier, staff have done their high-level matrix assessment, which fed into what council saw previously and what was prepared before our residential growth areas document went out for the public. We've also had input by Wellington Water Infrastructure inputs through staff. We've conducted some good stakeholder meetings amongst all the towns and had iwi input and going out to Marae and listening to hapu aspirations, particularly in regard to Papakainga housing aspirations and that going forward. And that's a signal of further work that we will get our heads into. Councillors have got out in the field and we've done site visits with staff. We've had 213 submissions and we've had good hearings where people have been able to put forward their views as to the merits of particular land going into a growth area or into future provisioning for a town or not. And previous workshops we've done together have been quite fruitful. So here's just as a recap, here's our spatial plan map and diagram. In terms of strategic capture, goes from our vision through to being mindful of what our district is about, where we currently are in the mid portion there, and where we want to bridge things and work together to get to our community outcomes. And the lower part being our clear recognition of the 4 well-beings and some delivery points linked to the LTP and also the 30-year horizon of the spatial plan. So we can come back to that if you wish later on. In our spatial plan itself, we had good consideration going into the aspects of seeing our district as a place to live, place to work, place to recreate, what we have within our district of value and what's worth protecting, whilst also recognising that we need to deal with growth and that nothing stays static, and our horizon is one cast to the year 2050. So just in terms of, so the spatial plan map has not changed since we went out for consultation. A lot of the feedback we got was in terms of the residential growth area provisioning. And we think our spatial plan, we should be proud of our spatial plan because it strikes that balance between protection and forward thinking and delivering sustainably for what's key within the district. In terms of consultation, there were 2 phases on that. We went out with an online survey where we pulled in 688 results in terms of the online survey. More recently, in terms of the residential, mapping our future to 2050 residential growth options, we had a response rate of 213 submissions being received in terms of step 1 spatial plan topic. Kendall's made the note there that we received 7.8% of our district's population had their say, which is pretty good. We've been to conferences in the past where some councils have tackled spatial planning and they've done it very lightly in terms of consultation and the effort they put into consultation. So I think we can say we've had good canvas. a key point is that 80% of respondents recognised that growth was required for the district and supported it, and that being up from an earlier percentage of 65. And there were the councillors might recall the 5 themes that emerged very clearly: heritage and character, so the challenge of delivering on ongoing heritage results and character, intensification, protective soils and farmland, and population and community, and the 5th one being infrastructure, good infrastructure considerations going into the future. Councillors would have, those councillors on the Planning and Regulatory Committee would have seen the timeline earlier, but here is our high-level timeline in terms of next steps of where we are today and the coming work that we have to deal with to make the spatial plan and residential growth areas come alive. So it's split into 3 phases. Spatial plan residential growth options is step 1. We get into next year and we get into the implementation or supporting elements of that, of our spatial plan thinking. And that takes us into master planning for Featherston, recognising that Featherston has been seen as a growth node and very strongly seen as a growth node through the Wellington Regional Growth Framework. Then we've got to do some master planning for Martinborough as well. And we've also, staff have to be active. It may not be staff alone, it'll be councillors getting into some of the engagement as well in terms of going out to re-engaging with iwi, but on getting clarity around Upper Kayunga aspirations. So that's in step 2. Step 3, when we early formed our document, our consultant gave us that clear signal of, well, don't forget about your rural areas, commercial and industrial areas. However, our district plan review has caught up with us, and we're already doing our thinking on in terms of planning policy and response and issue identification in terms of rural, commercial and industrial. So we're tackling that through the activation needed and the extent of review needed for particular chapters in the district plan. And then under the other point of step 3 mentioned is that the Greytown master plan will occur, but it's we can only deliver so much within a certain time frame, so that's seen to be put in step 3 or with a period of around 2 or 3 years. And then alongside that, in terms of doing our work, recognition of results, slotting in and aligning with annual plan and further LTP work. So we're tackling, in terms of the presentation, we're tackling the, as Kendall's also put in the report with its recommendations, the overheads here are, we're tackling the towns in the same order. We'll tackle Martinborough and then Featherston and then Greytown. So first up is Martinborough, and we have the areas of ME, which is the inner core of Martinborough, which encapsulates that mix of commercial and inner residential. The boundary of it is that black and white dashed line for the extent of MA, and then we have MD, which is all the rest of town where there is piecemeal development going on, and people are currently taking up opportunity to develop and put applications into us, and we're duly making decisions with that. So that's MD, the remainder of the town. MA is the Martinborough outer residential area. So the aspect of that is that it will provide, it will show that council is providing options in terms of not only medium density, but larger residential lifestyle opportunity as well. So for our Martinborough approach, we're providing a growth and provisioning, but also a mix within that approach. The other area, MF, which is out to the west, as you come into the town, that is also being seen as a growth area, and we still see value in opening up that area for provisioning where it's more medium density development for families coming into the town. The other areas mentioned in terms of the map, MB and MC, earlier thinking remains that they are areas for consideration further down the track, where we need to, we are recommending MA, MF and MD and ME with some, as part of our solution finding, but MC and MD down in the southwestern corner, so that's a consideration into the future.
Okay, I can take you through each growth option from here. So MA, Oxford Outer Residential, can provide roughly 200 homes of 2,000 to 4,000 metre square lots. We've used that metre squared as a general idea to estimate how many homes we could get. That would be subject to further master planning and layout and design. We recommend this area because it provides choice, which came out as a top priority for Martinborough. You'll see it has 64% support and 36 didn't support it. The reason that it wasn't supported was that it could potentially not provide enough affordable homes, smaller lots, and not enough choice. There were also concerns about losing some of the character of the area. So then on to MD, which is the existing mid-residential, that received the most support, with mid-residential reflecting our current density, which is 400 metre square minimum with a 500 average. That's what you can currently subdivide under our district plan. And you'll see in the map shown in green on MD, those are the lots that could be subdivided into one or two additional allotments. And as of today, there's only about 60 new lots that could be created. And most of them are on the outer side of Martinborough, not in the inner area. And again, even with MD, there were concerns that there still wasn't enough mid-residential land, and also that infill development, especially where you see towards the outside of town, could disrupt the town's form and character, given that Martinborough is the shape of the Union Jack and is very much a grid. Increasing infill development could just disrupt that. So to address further disruption in those areas, we're proposing a infill design guide. This is used across New Zealand throughout the districts. This would mean that it's basically like a toolkit. We put it out and offer options to increase the design and amenity of the lots. It would include things like the relationship to the road, reduction of heights of fences, entrances, colour, the interaction with open space, north-facing outdoor areas, site coverage, all of those matters that our current district plan doesn't include, with the aim to result in better design outcomes. In submissions, we found that people, particularly in Martinborough, didn't like the outcomes that were coming in as a result of infill, and that was for reasons such as transportable houses or kit set homes being built on these sites or transported in, and they weren't respecting the site area. They were just putting dwellings on there. Hastings has a quite a good design guide which reflects all of this, and they've just done theirs in 2020. Do we want to go? Does anybody have any questions about those before I move on, or?
Any questions regarding
These-
specifics or what we've?
Just these areas, because we might have to switch in and out.
Okay, so we will open up.
I thought maybe if we tackle each town and then open it up.
I'm going to do
questions.
this now?
Yep.
Okay. Give me a second. So as part of Martinborough, coming on from MD, we, as I mentioned, the submitters raised that there weren't enough existing mid-residential areas, and additional ones should be included. We received 6 requests for additional areas to be included, and we have gone through and assessed those against the same criteria as the original growth areas, and 2 of those have come out as being supported and able to connect to the town boundary and services. So those 2 there are shown as the block in Roberts Street and also the Regent Street frontage within MA. That was originally put forward as being the outer residential area, but it does have merit as it faces the road and lines up with those other residential zoning there. And the inclusion of those 2 areas could provide approximately 50 more homes in addition to what we're proposing. We also received the request to include MF. We had 44 submissions on this area, so it was the second highest submissions that we received, and 75% supported its inclusion, and this would be for lots in our current size of 400 to 500 metres squared. It could provide approximately 400 homes. We also put forward ME in a residential. This received a 48-52 split. 48% of people supported it, 52 were against it. Those that supported it thought it was a good option around the town square, as it's in close proximity to services, provide more choice, particularly for those working in town, families and our ageing population. And we would put a heritage design guide similar to the Infill design guide over this area. And there is currently one in Greytown, which I'll go to next, which manages density and design quite well. And you'll see here, there's 2 examples on this one. And this is sort of what what's been put forward to us as potential options in this area. You'll see that it's not big apartment buildings. You can get density increases through different means. So that's both Kendall and I we've in our thinking we've recognised that ME in a residential for Martinborough was not favoured by more councillors, and we're cautious about its potential. However, we thought if we brought it back to the table and discussed potential aspects associated or merit points around it, that and Kendall's included in the graphic at the bottom there, that it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see 3 or 4 story apartment blocks appearing in the inner core of Martinborough. It's that you can have densification with character and recognition of existing character. That's the whole premise behind the value of design guides and doing it right with the right level of componentry in a design guide.
Russell, can I just ask a question on that particular comment that you just made before I forget? What's the impact of the new legislation that's going through Parliament about infill housing. Is that going to affect small rural towns or not?
So that applies to those under the government's UDC document that was released, has been released. It affects metropolitan areas, mid-sized towns where there are various views as to whether we would be included into tier 3, but to be included into tier 3 of the approach, it has to be the population has to be anchored in an urban situation, in an urban context, whereas our district has a bit of a split. So once it's over 1,000 of an urban base, 10,000, it would be seen as needing to be included. But the approach, Councillor Plummer, you may recall our approach for the district plan review is we believe that Masterton is captured by those requirements, but it will be the status quo. It's envisaged to be the status quo for Carterton and South Wairarapa in terms of we will still require smaller scale developments to have parking on site.
Can I ask a question on that one as well before, and then Jeppy? And in the other options, you've put down what the gains might be. Have we not got an idea of what the additional housing gains would be through ME?
Not yet, because although we put out a rough density, so we put out in the spatial plan 150 to 200 metres squared, that's only an idea. It would depend on, so with the heritage guide, we'd go through and look at what's complementary to the area, and it would be included into that, the site density. It's not just a set per site.
The value of it is it's an extra tool in your toolkit in terms of provisioning for your town with associated design thinking. And
I'll be interested in the councillor's comments on this because it was, as you mentioned, not necessarily favoured by the public or councillors. So, but Jeppy, you had a question?
Yeah, just one, Russell, and you touched on it before. How will the combined district plan influence our final spatial plan?
that's one of timing. So we can signal our, once the councillors make their decision as to growth areas, we can signal that into the district plan at a high level. The point that Kendall was just making is that when you've determined an area for growth, particularly if it's a greenfield situation in a large area, that's when we have to do the master planning to come up with the layout and that link between planning and infrastructure provisioning and capacity and best fit for the land. And then we would get results from that master planning work and then formulate that into a plan change and then take it out. But the results from the residential growth areas can be an early signal into the district plan of where we see growth and but recognising that we need to do more further work on in terms of master planning. Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. And but do you think we need to, now we're going through the combined plan, whether we need to feed some of this information from our spatial plan into it, so we don't have to have a plan change?
We will feed in as much as we can, and we've given that we've kept Boffin Miskel abreast of where our work is at. So we still need to keep that message flowing.
Certainly, from what I understand, what we're doing today will give guidance, but it's not necessarily a statutory tool that they must adhere to. So we're not making any binding decisions here today. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I'm not sure if I understood your answer to my question, Russell. my question was about the announcement that the combined announcement from the Labor and National parties about that they are going to allow dwellings of up to 3 stories high in urban locations without consent, and what effect that will have on our city.
Yeah, that's for metropolitan centres.
At this stage, it doesn't affect us, Alistair, because.
Okay, that was my question. Yeah, did it affect us? Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Colenso. No, you're on mute, I'm afraid, councillor.
Yeah, no, I couldn't find my unmute button, so I found it now. Russell, when we had the discussions around the ME area, my understanding was that you've got in there that 52% were opposed to the smaller size sections, and I thought that we had discussed section sizes 300, 400 metres around that size too, so that we didn't end up around the square or the inner residential area of having an inner city metropolitan plan over a rural town. So I'm surprised that we're still looking at such small sections in this.
Can you answer that, Russell?
Yeah, that's correct, councillor. That at deliberations, there was reluctance to head down the track of density of around 200 square metres for that area in the core of the town. However, we thought that we'd bring it back and illustrate some potential that happens or results that happen around the country, and if whether there was merit or not in pursuing it further with associated guidelines supporting it and helping frame up the area in a clearer form.
So councillor, if we have a good discussion on that and decide that the status quo that you had ended up on is still the way, then we will remove that from our resolution that we pass. Okay,
I understand that, but in this presentation, then Russell and Kendall, do we have a slide pertaining to larger size sections in that area so that you've given us a comparison?
What we've done with the inner residential is we're saying we're not putting forward a density at this stage. We're saying that a heritage design guide that would come into place in the future would look at what can happen in that zone in terms of density. So in certain places that might mean that, say on a lot that is 900 metres squared in that ME area, that can't be subdivided now because it doesn't meet the 500 average, that you may be able to put one additional dwelling on there, whether that's in the form of a minor dwelling at the rear, or in other cases we've seen across the country, you can combine multiple lots together and do a more comprehensive development to get some more density while retaining the character at the front. So there's different ways of doing a heritage design guide that manages density.
So one of the key points in your decision making will be if you saw it as an opportunity for further provisioning and activating the inner core of the town, then there's potential merit in it, because it would give the accompanying guidelines would give clarity in terms of expected outcome within the most dense part of town. It would control the outcomes more rather than piecemeal applications coming in as growth comes along, and it'd give you a little bit more certainty in terms of the street interface between particular blocks and the street. Or else you're thinking maybe that that scale is not needed in the town. So we can discuss that further.
Councillor.
Is it me?
Do we discuss that further now, or do we discuss that further
We
later on?
We will discuss it before we move on to the next town. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hay.
Hi there. I've worked for a number of years with the Greytown Heritage Design Guidelines, and as we well know from the experience of the proposed 15-metre apartment block on Main Street, they have no teeth, and my big concern is what sort of legal teeth does the design guide have? And any design guides, I mean, you can give the design guides, but if it has no legal ramifications and it's just a guide, then we could still end up with a real mishmash of buildings and things. I'm just concerned about that. And the other thing is, if, for example, in the district plan, it's decided to retain the 15-metre maximum height, will the design guide override that district plan, or how would that all work together?
So, I mean, perhaps if I'm correct, if it's a council run and mandated design guide is quite different to a heritage suggestion group, I suppose you could say. At the moment, the design guideline that's put out by the Greytown Heritage Group does not have any teeth. That's an independent organisation, but I think one that is administered and created by council is part of the planning process. Is that correct?
And yeah, and I'll just add to that. So with Greytown, we do have ourselves, the district council does have a heritage design guide within our district plan, so that if any subdivision does come in, or any proposed alterations or additions to a site within the historic heritage precinct comes in for resource consent, it's a discretionary activity, which means we have full discretion on design, height, siting, character, scale. So that currently is only in the residential area of Greytown. We do have a heritage overlay on our commercial areas, but just not in Martinborough, beyond the commercial square.
Sorry, just to clarify, Alex, I wasn't meaning the Greytown Heritage and guide. Referring to the
I think that's a good example to use that, I think. And the second part of that was...
I was just going to say, to answer Councillor Hayes' question further, she does raise a point. However, what we should be doing in terms of clarifying the outcomes you want, i.e. getting tighter on the commercial height limit rules in your district plan, so you get the outcome you want. Having robust and very modern urban design guidelines, and I've been trying to fuse that message into the district plan work that we're currently doing. We're continuing to feed that message in. If a large development, it's always good to give an example to help answer the question. So for Councillor Hay and other councillors, if we got a large development that came in, and say it was mid to large, and we were concerned about outcomes, we should have a height limit rule, and we should have robust urban design guideline that we could refer to in any decision, or consent decision that arises. So hopefully that adds context, but I do note your point about guidelines in a general sense.
Yes, I mean, I would just like to make sure whatever's finally adopted, that it's able to be, to ensure that those guidelines are adopted and not too hazy or that kind of thing. So, because it can go hideously wrong, and even the example of where Ree Anderson's home up north of Auckland. Large chunks of it are extremely good, but there's some, it's just out of control on the outer edges of the town. So Matakana, this is I'm referring to. And I had a good look around Matakana in July or June, and I was quite disappointed in how it had panned out in some of the areas. So very large homes on small sites, etc., and poor streetscapes, etc., etc. So, it's not a given that it's going to be sticking to the plan as such. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Councillor West, did you have a question? I think you're next in line.
I'll wait for Rebecca, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Fox.
Thanks, Brenda. I do echo what Lee has said, but I must admit I'm very, very surprised to see this back in. We had, as a group during workshops, been really clear around what we considered to be a minimum size.
Excuse me, Rebecca, I'm sorry we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, that's better.
Okay, my apologies. I'll start again. I do agree with Lee's comments around the ability to, regulate a design guide. But I am surprised that we're seeing this back now for a decision around that minimum size when we were pretty clear in workshops that we did not want to go down to this size, and we had heard from our community, and our community did not want to go down that size. And we also heard from our community that they didn't want to see what could end up looking like a chocolate box development. And the little snip that you've got in the slide looks like a chocolate box development. People were very clear about maintaining the character of the inner part of Martinborough looking the way it does right now. That's what they associate with the town. And I'm not disagreeing that you could put houses behind the current houses, but then there's car parking matters to consider and increased traffic and a number of other elements. So I'm really surprised you put it down in this manner. And I'm also, we haven't got a design guide to even look at yet. We're being asked to make a decision on this. I just think that's really the cart before the horse. I thought we were quite clear on that right at the beginning.
You've made that point, Rebecca, and we'll certainly, I'm going to bring that up last after, when we finish the questions, just to run back on our approach for the ME, given the comments that have been made. Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor Alex. A spatial plan can be reviewed at any time. So I don't think we need to rush into the design of ME. Take it back to what we requested, the 400 to 500 sites. I'm also a bit, how do I put it? A bit concerned over the new information that we are now receiving, and we have not had time to actually reflect or even digest that. And what I refer to specifically is the Hastings Residential Intensification Design Guide. We have not discussed that in any of our workshops. We're not even aware of it. As you stated, that it was, was quite late in the piece. So just a couple of points there. New documentation being presented to us, and we're expected to make a decision on it. And just bear in mind that the spatial plan can be reviewed at any time. We don't have to make the big yes now. Thank you.
Right. Thanks. I've looked through the Hastings one, and I've had it on Stella for a while, so it's been quite interesting, but I still am mindful of the councillor's comments regarding the inclusion of ME in the resolution. So if we want to go around the table as to whether or not at this stage we would like to, are we happy with the resolution for the decisions for Martinborough excluding ME, and we can look at doing a vote on that. Is that what the consensus is? Around the table, possibly? Pam?
Well, I think that ME affects the rest of what we're doing as well. So I think because you're looking at inner residential, mid residential, and the outer residential. And so if you make a one decision, pull one piece out, then that is going to affect the whole plan, so to speak. So I don't know whether I'm happy pulling one part of it out.
I think it is a decision based on 4 parts, each of which should be interdependent or independent. I mean, we should be, if we say to council staff, you have reflected our decisions apart from ME, then we should be able to make that resolution. It's just that we're not densifying the ME area. So, but I mean, yeah.
But then, Mayor Alex, I think that we need to have the discussion around those other areas to make sure that everybody is comfortable where we're sitting on those other areas as each individual area.
Yep, we'll do that as well then. Harry, you have your hand up.
I just want to clarify with Russell. My understanding is if you take ME out, then it simply defaults to the same rules as MD, which is the 400, 500. Is that correct, Russell?
Correct.
Yep. So if you take it out, then you simply have got the status quo for that area. So it effectively becomes inside MD. So the same rules apply. Does that help you, Pam?
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Harry.
Cool. Rebecca, your thoughts on that? And then we'll go back to the other areas as well, just to make sure that we're happy.
I can live with that. I think we discussed that Martinborough was potentially comfortable with having a 400 square metre section size. That might not be the case for other areas so much, but I think that the conversation around ME not being the way it is right now, we should vote on that.
Cool. Councillor West.
I think we should vote on, reflection of what Rebecca and Pam have been saying. Thanks.
Cool. Councillor Ems.
I support Rebecca. Just a couple of points I'd like to raise, a point of information. What will the height be in ME if you went to these smaller section sizes? And question, the area from Roberts Street on the west side, is that in or out now? Because the first slide it was out, and the new on the Stella version it's in. So it's
a very good question, Gary. There's Roberts and Regent, which are now being included. Are they being included in MD?
Yes, they'll be included.
So it's a minor extension into that rural area because of inconsistencies into MD.
And I have got that for that on the following slide. We just haven't got to that one yet. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. We had a submission on it, and I supported what they were saying, but just the first slide didn't have it. But can you give me an indication of what, if you proceeded with MD, can we take out ME? What does that do to the height restrictions? Status quo?
Status quo.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I would just like to add, if we do take ME back to MD, no further development can happen within the proposed ME area. All of those sites are too small for any further subdivision. As I said, you need a 500 average, so the lots need to be about 1,000 to 1,100 metres squared within that block. They're all old titles, and they're roughly around 900 metres squared, so they wouldn't be able to be developed in any way. Whereas MD, you could get actually more density further out of town just
because of the shape of the section.
Because of the shape of the traditional sections, yeah. So it'd be actually, by removing it, would be creating more density actually out of town.
Taking Councillor West's point, do we actually have to make a decision on that today? Because can we not come back to that at some later date?
We are wanting to, so the spatial plan has hung around for quite a while. We want to have relevant discussion, but get decisions on it, and hopefully we can achieve that.
But we could alter it with another review at some stage in the future. Councillor Hay.
Thank you.
So, sorry, maybe being a bit stupid, Kendall. So if you say in ME you've got a 900 square metre section, and what I think most councillors favour is 400 square metres as a minimum, maybe 350 we could get to. So if you've got a 900 square metre section, are you suggesting it because most of the original houses are centred into the section of the land, or they need to be moved forward, and that prevents?
So our current district plan subdivision rules, they require a 500 metre square average of each lot that's created. So you would have seen me refer to 400 to 500. So you can have a minimum of 400 metre square lot, provided the other one is 600, but that also excludes your right-of-ways. So that's where I say you would need about 1,100 metres squared to be able to create one new lot.
And so how did the numbers pan out if you then did 350 square metres, for example? I mean, having lived in Auckland, you know, where you've got section sizes of 200 square metres and even less, I just think it dramatically changes the look and feel of a town. And while it's fine in Auckland, I just am not happy about it. Cool. And given the fact you want to move on, Russell, I'm a bit with Pam that I don't see how we can take ME out of the equation and look at it in isolation. I'm concerned, and even with the default setting, as Harry suggested, I just think we need to have a look at the whole thing in totality. And so maybe we have a vote on the thinking around section size, I don't know, as an option.
I think it might be quite radical to be talking different section sizes at this stage in the game.
Exactly.
Look, we'll park that thought again, Lee. We'll go to Alistair for your thoughts on this.
Look, I'm in the same boat as Rebecca. I'm surprised to see ME back on the table. I thought we gave very clear guidance that we weren't proceeding with ME. I'm quite comfortable with the MD rules. And Kendall, yes, I take your point that it may well add density slightly out, but it's actually still density within the overall scheme of the district plan. So it's not really intensification at all. It's just meeting the rules of the district plan. And I think that, sorry, and I think if we play around with ME, it changes the whole feeling of the town. The town, the heritage part of the town is as it is now, and you mess with that at your peril. And we got it very clear from the residents; they don't want to mess with it. That's my
GP.
The unmute button's not working. Hey, yeah, I agree with Pam here. It is the guts of our town of what attracts people there. We don't want to be messing around with it too much. And I get Kendall's point that it can put pressure out further, but there's more room out further to be able to take that pressure.
Yeah, cool. I mean, with you, I've been thinking about your comments, councillors, Pam, regarding not taking ME out. But I think since we've added it, if Russell and Kendall hadn't said, let's put this in with a different slant, then we would still be voting on A, B, and C without E anyway. A, B, and C without D, i.e. ME. So I don't think it actually materially changes what we had decided at the end of the spatial plan consultation. I'm more than happy for us to move or move forward, but then just say I'm happy with A, B, and C as our resolutions with regards to the spatial plan, and parking D, ME in the residential for a review in the future. Are we comfortable with that, given that's what we would normally have done anyway? Councillor Fox.
Thank you. I agree with you, Alex. We still would have been looking at A, B and C. I think it's really important that we remember what one of our submitters said, Louise Lister. And Louise said very clearly, let's press pause. And she was quite clear, and I agree with her submission and recall it very well, that she was just saying if we focus on one area, we can allow everything else to happen behind it in a managed way. So I'm comfortable going with A, B and C and removing the ME area. That's my view, but I will of course defer to my colleagues if needed.
Now, would you like to go back and look at MA, MF and MD, or are you comfortable that they've landed on what we decided at the end of these submissions in our workshops? We've got Alistair comfortable, Rebecca comfortable, Garrett comfortable, Lee, Jeffy, Pam, you did raise some concerns.
Can I just ask one question, Russell and Kendall? If we agree to this today, what is the next steps, and when does the change in zoning happen? Or bringing in the smaller sizes? Because I just need to, does that happen after that we go out to the public again with the master plan, or does this automatically say that this is going to be a residentially zoned area now?
Are you referring to all areas?
All areas.
All areas, yeah.
So look at, let's go back to what the zoning is currently. So MA, the outer residential, is currently rural, so that will be a change to residential. The MF.
So, stop there. At what point does it become a change to residential?
Well, as I say in my earlier question in the answer in the presentation, we need to undertake the master planning and get all that done before we shape up a plan change. And my earlier comment at the higher level was that what we should do is get our decision and signal that high level decision of areas into the strategic chapter of the combined district plan, which we have earlier liaised or advised Boffa that would be a component step.
So I think.
So Russell, you're talking about 2 years, roughly.
Yeah. So it'll be a while. The decision we're making today does not guarantee that the zoning will change, more than a direction will be passed through to the district plan committee.
Okay, so what you're saying in layman's terms, so I can understand this, is that the decision we make today gives you the heads up to do the master plan based on what we say today. And when you've done the master plan, that will come back to council and then go out for public consultation again.
Correct.
Well done.
Okay. Thank you. I've just got to get it clear in this little low brain of mine.
No, well, that was a good synopsis to clarify, Pam, so thank you. Right, so I'm going to go. Do we have any more slides on Martinborough?
I do have just the final slide showing all the areas.
Shall we have a look at that?
All right. Here we go.
Here we have the options for Martinborough.
Yep, that's what we've just been discussing. Yep.
So Emma, A is over 30-year horizon. A is MA Oxford Outer Residential. MF, that which was also included in the consultation document, Ferry Road Mid Residential. And then MD for the remainder of the town, where it's seen as existing mid residential to occur. And then ME, we can remove that. And then also recognition that, which gets back to Councillor Clenzo's point, master planning to begin in year 2 to look at what will result in the areas of MA and MF.
Cool. Right. Okay, any questions?
Russell, I guess two inclusions in MD are Roberts and Regent Street, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can see them there on the map.
Yes. Do the councillors see the logic in that and what how we've tried to respond in terms of seeing that that upper portion of MA being
I think I do, in as much as the horse is bolted. There's been scattergun, inconsistent allowances in the past, and it's very much tidying it up. And also, I firmly agree along Regent Street that there's just such a mishmash of housing in a rural area anyway. It doesn't make sense not to. You've got a wide road, you have services. Why wouldn't you?
as we look to, the councillors might want to also note that as we do our work on master planning, it's going to be a maybe simpler approach doing that in MF, because there's the nature of the land holdings. There's two large property owners there. You've got a blank canvas to achieve your residential results, whereas MA we know is a piecemeal situation, currently rural, but multiple land holdings, and trying to get a good potential roading pattern through there, we'll have to have some good thinking on it.
Indeed. Right, any more questions or comments on that? Councillor Fox.
Just a comment around MF and first part is at least MF allows us with a greenfields development to give that area the look and feel that suits Martin Borough now and into the future, which is good, and it also allows us to plan for future infrastructure. But with MA, if we proceed with that additional development, I guess the thing is making sure that we've had the conversations with Wellington Water, that we've got the ability to deal with the increased infrastructure needs with that now. Not everyone wants to subdivide their property potentially now, but I'm concerned about the rate that might happen and how we actually manage for infrastructure.
And I think if you remember the concerns we had on MA and the promise with regards to master planning to ensure that it kept a rural feel. But also, if we remember MF and its attraction was the paper roads allowing an inclusional access into the major parts of the town, and how attractive that was as well. Councillor West.
Thank you, Mayor Alex. I'm just still a bit concerned over your comment about yourself reviewing the Hastings Residential Intensification Design Guide. I can't find it on Stella. I can't find it in my emails. If you could forward that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. I think it was a link within the Stella document, wasn't it? Just if I remember. Just 1 second. Find that.
Excuse me, Alex, can I ask, just while you're looking for that, another question of Russell?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, hey, Russell and Kendall question really. So just thinking about Hastings, did you have a look at the master planning for Arrowtown or Queenstown at all in your?
Yes, we did.
And how did you?
I had included that in one slide about the heritage design principles that would come in, and how Arrowtown has included those design principles and some of their outcomes on their old town and also their new town and those results.
Right. Okay then. So it did inform some of your thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Kendall.
Kendall, could I ask you a question too, please, while you've got that map up?
Yep.
Just got to find it. It's bugging me.
Cool. Can you, in that ME, just harping back to that ME area, and the outer, it's obviously that black white dotted line is the outer area of that ME place.
Yes.
If you looked at sections, and I presume that those sections within that on the outer edge of that are more in the 900 square metre range of size. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, so within the black line heading into town, all of those, so those ones there that are shown green, they are 1,000 metres squared, so there's only 6 in there that could be further subdivided. Everything else is below that.
Okay, so if instead of having a size in there of 120 to 200 on that outer area, if you had a 300 square metre size section, would that then give you enough space to subdivide a 900 square metre section?
Yes,
I'm not talking about really close to the square, but I'm just talking about that one street on the outer edges of the area.
Yes, so if it was either 350 or 400 metres squared, then it could be subdivided, or another dwelling added into the rear.
Okay, so if you're looking on the centre, just to clarify that, if you're looking on the square side of, for example, Cologne Street, which is where that Cologne Street where you've got that outer area, then those sections on that square side of Cologne Street could be subdivided at 400 square metres.
Yes.
All of them, or only those ones in green?
The majority of them within that ME area are still 800 to 1,000 metres squared. So most of them would be able to be subdivided or enable one more dwelling if we did do a 350 to 400 metres square.
Okay, so my next question is that before we vote on Martinborough, I'd like to go through the other 2 towns as well and then come back and do any voting, please.
Sure, no, that's fine. We'll do all the voting at the end, and we'll just, much like we did in past meetings, we'll say, okay, in theory, we're okay, carry on, and then we'll do all the voting at the end. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, I think that there might be some things that come up in the other areas that may affect Martinborough. So, yeah, to do it like that would be good. Thanks, Mary Alex.
Cool. Thank you, Lee, for emailing out the design guide. Where was that? It's really bugging me now on where that was in the documentation. And Brenda's quite right. I couldn't see it in the Stellar, and I thought it was.
I just jumped onto Hastings District Council and
I'll get back to you, Brenda, on exactly where that was embedded in the documentation. Right, so carry on then. Russell and Kendall.
We move to Featherstone. So we know that when the consultation document went out, there was mentioned that approximately, in terms of anticipating approximately 800 additional people within Featherstone the next 30 years. Wellington Regional Growth Framework has noted Featherstone as a growth node. We have seen the potential in that and the need to work alongside Wellington Regional Growth Framework in terms of what's coming in the door and growth overall. We're Featherstone is slowly changing and encountering growth with increased population. Featherstone is attracting a younger population, including families, which is great. And we received, out of the 213, we received 99 on the topic of Featherstone and its future. So in terms of our approach for Featherstone, it's harking back to what we had discussed earlier, the option of FA, which is the core of Featherstone, including that 1 kilometre radius out from the train station, in line with the growth node identification of Wellington Regional Growth Framework, and an area to the south and to the north. So FB is Featherstone Outer Residential to the south, which allows for some larger lots, and also noting the lovely amenity out to the north, FC, Featherston Outer Residential North. So within our mix of approach for Featherston, we're dealing with a growth node at the core and providing some outer residential lifestyle options, north and south. So nothing has changed there in that realm, but it needs to be backed up with master planning to occur for Featherston next year, and to identify some solutions. And the key value will be working with the community in that work and compiling a draft, looking at it and then putting it out as a formal document in the latter part of next year. The red boundary is the anticipated scope of Featherston in the future, with that mix of FA, the 1K radius, FB to the south, outer residential, and FC to the north. So we've provided some option and decent capacity for Featherston's 30-year future.
And we would be master planning all of those areas, not just FA. It would include FA, FB, and FC.
And if I remember correctly, I mean, there's a few impracticalities there, but this is a general area that is more preferable than anywhere else.
Yeah.
We've got some floodplain there. We've got some, yeah. But certainly, I remember going down FC actually and realising through Brenda that was a logical area for growth, given the height of the land over the surrounding land. Let's go through. Councillor Hay.
Oh, hi there. Just a quick question. So, FB, if you look at it on the left-hand side of your diagram, that is the continuation of Underhill Road, where we're looking at smaller rural blocks, lifestyle blocks. Is that correct, Russell?
Yeah, well, we've called it outer residential, but lifestyle blocks.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was captured and I wasn't reading it incorrectly. Thank you.
Sorry, Lee, FB is actually not Underhill Road, FC is Underhill Road.
Yeah. Yeah. So Underhill Road's got part FA and then part FC.
I see. Thanks, Brenda.
Cool. Brenda.
Have we, through our spatial planning, have we acknowledged where we want our commercial for any of our towns where we want to place commercial industry?
I think that's stage 2 of our spatial plan, according to that diagram that
Okay, cool.
was presented, where we're doing residential, commercial and rural in this financial year. Is that correct?
No, it's a very good question from Councillor West. And the master planning for Featherston, and as Kendall's mentioned, it's entire in terms of the thinking on it, it's entire capture, right. And within that, it's the potential for commercial, the rationality around what's commercial, what could possibly change. So the master plan needs to provide answers on residential, elements of commercial, and activating the streetscape, the main street of Featherston. So it'll be a all-in-one study.
And that also comes from the Wellington Regional Growth Framework, and with Featherston being identified as the transport-orientated development.
So when we do the next stage or tier of spatial plan, which was commercial industrial, that will feed into the master planning, or is it the other way around?
Well, there's opportunity to do that with a new master plan for Featherston.
Cool.
But when Ree got us thinking about doing it in stages, she maybe wasn't aware of what work was taking place within the district plan review itself, and the zoning and future of commercial areas and industrial areas are already being tackled in the district plan.
Lee, have you got your hand up again? No. So any comments on this? We've got FA, FB and FC. I don't think any of these are remarkably controversial, and they seem to have a pretty good support of the public. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Russell, I think this captures everything we discussed in the workshops, and I think you've got it bang on.
Gareth.
Sorry, there's a couple of points. Carrying on from Brenda's point, I'm assuming that heritage will also be included in that next phase, because I think at one stage we were talking about the heritage sites like the Anzac Hall and places like that, which are very important to the community. One other point that I know we discussed was FB in the south side there. There's been a lot of discussion among the community about flood zoning down there. Point being, if FB is flood prone, then we shouldn't be actually extending. But if the stop banks have not been built, then maybe we should actually be extending it further. Now, I think that was also a consideration which we had a discussion about with the WAG people in Greytown, about whether or not the additional work they are doing there on the Wahine would do the same thing. So I'm just raising the point that in the bottom southern side between the two FBs, which goes across from Donald Street, that has been cut out. And the same thing with WAG in Greytown. Now, can we come back and review those at some stage further on, or is it cut and dried now?
So what the point he's making is down there between the two FBs is the swathe of floodplain that's based in a 1902 flood map, which is, I think you're correct, that it's being reviewed as we talk. So
yeah,
that would be removed, which would then logically square that off in the FB as to add more capacity.
Yeah, well, that one, and also the Greytown one in North Street. I think we're looking at.
We'll get to that. If you point that out when we get to Greytown.
So you're talking about that. You're talking about the area south of the red.
Yeah. Yes.
Red line.
So what you could do. So what I think Garrick's asking is, should floodplains change? Are we able to do a mini review of this to see if there's any changes we want to make as a result of those changes?
And there's already the existing floodplain effectively being, and it's going back up towards the mill.
Yeah,
we can keep our thinking open and note that down and capture it as part of our master planning work.
So if you're okay, Garrett, we'll park that until such time as it occurs.
That's fine. I'll be raising the same thing in Greytown. Somebody else.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but my understanding of a spatial plan, because it's a 30 to 40 year plan, it's a living document.
It is giving direction though to planners where we have a logical area. Yeah.
Absolutely, but as technology and everything changes, that needs to be incorporated. So it's still a living document. It's a guide.
Yeah. Yep, you're right.
The only point I'd make, I mean, Councillor Eames raises a good point in terms of not losing anything, but the only other counter to it is how much area do we need to the south in terms of infrastructure provisioning, what we need, noting that the core of Featherston's future will be that 1K radius.
Cool. Well, we might talk about that, saying even though it's changed, no, because of services, we could do a little update. Pam, I noticed your hand's up. Yeah. Garrick, you still got your hand up.
Just to finish, yes, the services are going down there, and we do have that new sewage pipe down there as well. So the infrastructure is into that area. I'm not getting too carried away, but just to make sure that we can move as technology moves.
Yep.
Note that.
Pam?
Thank you. Russell, could you just clarify it for me? You mentioned the master plan for Featherston would be the whole district, and therefore industrial and commercial and things like that would be discussed at that time. For the other two towns, will the master plan be for the whole area and do the same?
Can we tackle that when we look at the when we look at the towns, those other towns?
Well, we've looked at Martinborough, so can we answer it on that question, please?
So for Martinborough, we will be master planning the new additional areas, whereas for Featherston, because it is identified in the Wellington Regional Growth Framework as a transport orientated development, we will be looking at the town as a whole and the redevelopment of Featherston in respect to that.
So quite a different approach.
A different approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so loud and clear came across in the public consultation that we needed to look at commercial and light industrial areas for Martinborough. So when will we be looking at that for Martinborough? Sorry, I couldn't get that tongue twister out.
Yeah, so that'll be the second tier of the spatial plan, won't it?
Yeah.
So that's that second part of the spatial plan that we're doing this financial year.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Cool. So do we have any more comments on Featherston? And if we have any issues with the resolution 3, we're looking at FA, FB and FC adoption. If we're okay, before we move on to Greytown, I'm gonna, if everyone's happy, we'll do a 15-minute break, stretch your legs and go to the bathroom, and we'll come back at 5 past, go 5 past 3. How about that? All good? It's 11 minutes.
We'll just let
I wasn't, my maths was no good. Hi, everyone. It looks like you're having a fit of some sort, Garrick.
I'm going to move to a royal wave.
Right, so we're back. Cool. We've got Brenda, are you back? Not yet. We'll just wait for Brenda to come back and then we'll kick on.
Should clarify that. Yes.
Alex, could I just make one comment on the Featherston before you move on to Greytown, please?
We will. Okay, we'll do that certainly.
Thank you.
There we go. Brenda's back. Cool. Now, before we move on to Greytown, Councillor Colenso, just
just one small amendment. Russell and Kendall, in the additional growth information that you've got on the towns, under page 48 and 49, hold on, just shut the window a minute. You talk about 35 Donald Street, but you mention that as Greytown, not as Featherston. It's at the top of the next page.
What page was that again, Pam?
Page 48, and then it's at the top of page 49 in the additional growth information.
Right.
Oh, yes, it does too.
Yeah, I just thought if it's going to be a public document, it just needs to be right.
Just a typo there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We clarified that earlier point. Sorry, we clarified that earlier point.
If you feel we need to.
Councillor Colenso. And
Yes.
Just on your topic of, you raised the point about giving due consideration for commercial areas of Martinborough. So I wanted to clarify how that is likely to be tackled. The more immediate way in terms of commercial zoning or any change and how much is needed in Martinborough, that's the first avenue for that is the consideration that goes into the district plan review, commercial chapter. So that's the main avenue in which that would be captured. I just wanted to re-clarify that point for you.
Thank you, Russell. Does that include, it's probably more the light industrial where people want to set up a small business but don't need a great big plot to run their business, that sort of thing as well? Does that come under the same way of doing it?
You want to come up, James, or not?
Good afternoon. James, for those of you who haven't met me, Planning Manager. So in terms of what we've been asked from BOFA at this stage is a light touch assessment or analysis on rationalisation at this in terms of the existing layouts. There are going to be some changes in different terms and words used that we're now required to use under the national planning template. So there'll be words like mixed use zone, town centre zone, and industrial zone that will probably be sort of feel a bit odd. So I would expect that the mixed use zone is probably for the smaller scale peripheral commercial, which is sort of the type of zone that those activities are probably most appropriately located. Industrial will focus on probably the more heavier materials, town centre zone, services and retail, entertainment sort of deal. So essentially, we have been asked to look at some of the mixed use zones areas. We have done a rationalisation of those at this stage. They should be, I think my understanding is that they'll be, some of just our high level suggestions will be tabled tomorrow at the combined district plan meeting. They haven't been included in the agenda, so if Councillor Jeppe is wondering where those maps are, he hasn't been provided with them yet. And again, are intended to have a bit of a leap-off point for a discussion to start with.
Thanks, James. And so, Councillor Clem, so one of those consideration points is what do we expect to see in future years in the light industrial zone, for example? Does that help answer your question?
Yep, that'll be good. So, yep.
Oh,
Thank you.
all right, back to the presentation then, Kendall.
Okay, we're on to Greytown now. So just a quick recap. 1,080 people over the next 30 years. Roughly 700 to 800 homes are required. And Greytown actually has the most residential capacity available at the moment. So 250 lots could be created by subdivision as of today. We also have the Orchards Retirement Village, which is within the GB area, and they are creating 180 retirement units with a hospital, apartment area to come.
The Greytown development area.
Yes, and that includes the Greytown development area within GF, which is in the red area there, with the majority of that not being developed in the short term. So we received 132 submissions for Greytown's growth options. And as we discussed last time, we put forward GB, which was Jellicoe to Papawai, with development in GF to continue. So what we've done is we've put forward two options now from our last workshop. Option one is retaining the GB area as it is, with master planning to be undertaken. There were concerns about potential areas which could be a bit wet or have stormwater issues. Our engineers have identified generally where those areas are, and the master planning would include those, and whether that's through that would designate that area as open space or larger lots, that's for that process to set out. And that's similar to what the Orchards Retirement Village has done with some of their stormwater swales and areas. So that is option one, with the inclusion of two additional areas, which is the Papawai Road block. You will see that to the south of GB, if I just go back there, just below GB, across the road. We received two submissions on that area, and we also received one for 51 Jellicoe Street, which is to the north of GB and extends from the current residential zone. Both of those areas aren't used for primary production activities, all contain dwellings, and are within sort of the current zoning and character. So that is Greytown option one. Option two, following on from our last workshop, we were asked to look at reducing the area of GB to avoid some of those more wet areas, and also to avoid some of the class 1 soils. So this is being reduced by about 18 hectares, but can still provide approximately 650 new homes. To then get that to the point where we can reach our 30-year population growth, we've looked at the other options that were raised as requiring a bit more further information and assessment. and that was GC, which was the North Street extension, subject to flooding works being completed, and also GA, which is the Governor's Green extension, which originally scored quite high, but does have some restrictions. Both could provide about 100 homes, which would get us to 750, which is close to our required 800. And that shows those areas there. So you can see with the Governor's Green, it's a typical large lot development. Most dwellings have been established already. They're quite large, with open space around them. There is only one road in, no access from the state highway, and it's also limited by the rail trail. And there are some concerns with retrofitting infrastructure there. And the other option is the North Street extension, which is within close proximity of town. The only reason it didn't score as high as the others originally was the flood risk. And we have looked at that in line with the Waiahine Action Plan, which is yet to be adopted. And in terms of potential development there, it is a good option, subject to that coming in, but we haven't got those timelines just yet. That one, Russell.
Yeah. Thanks, Kendall. That's a good summary. The other area is GD Woodside Station. For a refresher for councillors, it was originally noted in the Wellington Regional Growth Framework as a potential. It dropped down the list and didn't get included. However, they made the point that you as a council may want to look at that in terms of its potential to deliver housing provisioning in the longer term. We still see it as the 20-year plus option. Last time it came up, councillors indicated to us that they had heard that the residents weren't too keen on it because it would take away the potential of Greytown itself. That was some of the thinking. So there was reluctance, but it's been kept in as part of our solution finding for the longer term, i.e. 20 years plus, and the fact that it's a greenfield potential, and when we get to do thinking on it, that it has great potential for outlay and looking at a mix of homes close to a rail network. So Kendall's given you a little primer as to the options 1 and 2 for Greytown. Option 1 is the simpler model, i.e. going with the original GB, which extends from Jellicoe down to Papawai, providing mid-residential. The other option 2 is a combined approach where we've shrunk the size of GB, made it head north away from Papawai Road, but to get the housing provisioning happening, supported by GA to the southwest and GC North Street extension area. So supplemented by Governor's Green and the North Street areas if you went with option 2.
Be either or, so it would be GA or GC to get that growth.
All right, councillors. Alistair's already got his hand up.
Thanks, Alex. I've got a couple of questions or a couple of points. My understanding on GA was that actually had a resounding no because we were very concerned about ribbon development going up Woodside Road. And so that got a resounding no from almost everybody, and it was almost impossible to connect it to the town given the structure and that it was large sections. So I'm not quite sure why that's back in.
That one was GE. So there was originally a Woodside extension, which went from Greytown out towards Woodside. So we did put that option in and removed it for those reasons. GA was a different option.
Right. Well, the same argument is there because it goes along Woodside Road. The second point was in terms of the Woodside area development itself. A lot of the argument against that was again for that possibility of ribbon development joining the two development areas together, which was very much not in the keeping with the submissions that we had because it changed the whole dynamic of the town. But my understanding is that the concept as a concept actually was reasonably popular. I was the one who was going, why would anyone want to live by a railway? But seems that I was walked out of that position during the workshops. And my third comment would be on GB. My recollection is that GB was going to be shortened, but still stay against Papawai Road to make it a smaller area, not extending as far down Papawai Road, bringing it back to the side of what's the bush down there, Lee? I can't remember what it's called, but there's some
Tate's
Reserve down there.
Reserve.
So it was going to go as far as Tate's Reserve, but not include Tate's Reserve. If that's what I remember, is that right, Rebecca?
That's my recollection as well.
But would continue up against Papawai Road. Otherwise, you've got this area of I don't know, like a dagger sticking into the side of Greytown. So that's my comments.
Right. Okay. We'll just cover those a bit in our stage. So, what are your reaction to?
So we were asked to look at. I'll just see if I can move that. Sorry. We were asked to look at options of reducing GB, and that was mainly to do with Class 1 soils and potential of this Papawai stream and high stormwater, high groundwater and overland flow. So this option has excluded those. If we did reduce it to come up from Tate Reserve and reduce that in half, the problem is the Orchards Retirement Village, where the GB letters are, is the extent of that. So a lot of that is already developed if we did cut it in half already, and we wouldn't get the connections into town and keep that sort of urban form. That's why this is the option that's been presented.
And your comments on GA?
So just on that doesn't make sense. If the Orchards comes to where the letters GB are and you've reduced it closer to GB away from Papawai Road, the connections to town even become more difficult and more concentrated. So that just doesn't make logical sense.
There are connections as these paper roads. You can get through Market Road and through one off, is it Manahira Street? But yes, reducing the size of GP does reduce the connections.
Councillor Hay.
Yeah, Councillor Hay.
Hi there, thanks for that. So there's, Alice, just to go back to your comments, so in GB, probably about 1.5 kilometres along Papawai Road, a lot of those properties have big flood issues, and when there's heavy rains, so I'm assuming that's what you've deleted, Kendall and Russell, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, part of that, Councillor Hay, and the fact that trying to come up with a logical portion of land, bearing in mind property titles when you did your study, Kendall.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then going on to Governor's Green, so GA. So the suggestion is that what are the current lot sizes? Are they about 2 acres roughly?
Currently in GA, they're about 1 to 2 to even 3 hectares in there.
So the assumption there is that you would allow those sections to be subdivided. Is that correct?
Yes, we'd allow them to be similar to what we've proposed in Martinborough as an outer residential area. So 2,000 to
4,000. Okay. So then, but you don't plan on extending the current Governor's Green further out. The extension or the subdivision would just occur within the current, what is Governor's Green, is that correct?
Yes, just that area shown in GA. There is that additional land behind, just back off from the actual road that has been included in there.
Okay. And so then thinking about North Street, so I'm assuming if you go along State Highway 2 and turn left, are you meaning that to be only on the western side of North Street? Is that, or
Yes.
are you also including the eastern side of North Street?
Only the western side, where there's current sort of larger lot, rural residential development. Everything on the other side is farmland, so that would remain.
Okay, so, and again, so am I correct in thinking you said 100 sections could come out of that North Street?
Yes, yeah, and that would be based on if that was to be mid-residential, which is 400 to 500 metres squared, similar to the other towns.
And then the northern bit of farmland that's not included in your deliberations, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, the northern area wouldn't be included.
Okay, okay. And the other, just from recollection again, thinking about the Woodside little area, and am I right in remembering that you had earmarked just a kilometre going around the station? I mean, it wasn't going to trickle down Woodside at all, was it?
I'll half you this time. I think yeah.
Yes, so similar approach to the Featherston of 1K radius. So you get your close development to the, and you activate the railway line and interface.
But you'd be looking at master planning there as well.
Yeah.
Okay then, so look, I don't know about Alistair and Rebecca and everybody else, but I do have concerns about some of the flooding. I've got several friends in Papawai Road, and whenever there's massive rains, the paddocks are just flooded. It's hopeless. So for me, I can see the advantages of option 2, but that's just my opinion.
Cool. Councillor Fox, Rebecca.
Thank you. Lee's actually asked a number of questions that I was going to raise, so thank you for doing that, Lee. That's really good. I just wanted to revisit just the minimum lot size again. Kendall, you mentioned before that if we had the 1,000 square metres, basically 1,000 square metres can be drawn into an average section or an average of 500 square metres. So you could have a 400 square metre and 600 square metre lot. I was quite sure during our conversations with residents and others in Greytown that there was very little appetite to reduce the section sizes any further because there was the need to try and keep Greytown looking green and manage for the greenness and the trees that are here. Just wonder if you can comment on that first before I go on to my next bits.
Yes, yeah. So we haven't proposed any increased density in Greytown. The majority of Main Street in particular is covered by our Heritage Design Guide, and that aims to keep sort of some larger sections through there. And a lot of our properties in Greytown are heritage listed and have protected trees, which does keep their sections relatively larger as well.
Okay, I'm actually suggesting to you that we don't have section sizes that go down to 400 square metres because that was what I'd heard from people, was that there was very little appetite to have a section size of that size in Greytown, and some of the appealing parts of this town were the fact that it had space around it and people could access and use that space on their property.
Yeah, we've just applied our current density limits to those mid-residential areas. For, say, if we were to do master planning in GB, then that's where we'd look at what those lot sizes may be. The density is just an indicator to show this is how many houses we could roughly get from it.
Okay, that gets me to my next point, which is actually around master planning for the town to make sure that we can try and preserve the look that the town has. There's a few interesting things going on around town at the moment that are allowed by rule, and I would not like to see them continue, and I think many of our residents wouldn't either. So if we were looking at master planning, I think there would be some value for that to keep the look of a town, as we probably need to do in all of our towns actually. Picking up on the point that Councillor Hay made with regard to GA, Governor's Green Extension, I would see that if there was a general appetite to head that way, that we would have to master plan that as well. Just you mentioned that it could happen, but I would be suggesting to you that it does need to happen.
Yeah, we would be master planning all of the proposed growth areas.
Okay, and the areas that are alongside Papawai Road that have been taken out of the reduced GB area, so they're still going to have extensive flooding issues with them, or groundwater issues. I'd suggest to you that if we have a high level of development in that area, that potentially those problems could be exacerbated, as we don't have adequate stormwater networks in Greytown. And maybe this is actually an opportunity to look at the way in which we develop and use attenuation basins and other areas so that we could actually bring that area back into the conversation. Has any thought been given to that?
Yeah, that's part of developing that area. And like I said, the retirement village has looked at non-standard, well, for the Wairarapa, non-standard stormwater management systems such as swells and potential for ponds and things like that. So that would definitely be looked at as part of developing that area.
So could that be looked at as part of developing that area if we leave GB as it is in option 1, as opposed to reducing the size of it in option 2? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point, Councillor Fox.
So if I could follow on from that, just Rebecca, briefly, and you can carry on. You mentioned that your engineers had got a grip on GB on an initial review. So the engineers are confident that the flooding issues raised by residents are able to be managed within that subdivision in either A or B.
And they gave us a reasonable level of confidence in terms before we took it out for consultation.
Cool. Thanks, Rebecca, for interrupting me. Carry on.
I don't think I have interrupted you.
Oh, well, that's nice. I don't apologise. All right. Do we have any more questions? I mean,
actually, Alex, you interrupted Rebecca.
That's about what I was about to say. I do actually hadn't quite finished. So the engineers have said that we can use GB as option 1 or as option 2, and even in option 1, there's sufficient confidence that we could appropriately develop that area using non-standard methodology, as you've just said, Kendall. We could still do that.
Yes, yeah, and say if we did look at GB, it may, is option 1, it may mean those areas could be larger lot sizes. That's what sort of the master planning sets out. So
okay,
yes, it can be managed in both.
Okay, so we could be looking at some potential options for not having so many hard surfaces and pavements around properties and as well, which would lead to that support for a greening of the area.
Yes, and making wise decisions around lot sizes or mix of sizes, plus the use of swales, serving stormwater function as well as green walkways through an area.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone's got their hands up now. Councillor Eames.
Yeah, just a quick one, Russell. We have an option 2, GC or GA. Could it not be and or if we're looking for additional sites? Do we have to exclude one or t'other, or we just try to be economical?
In terms of option 2, we've done our rethink, and we're serving up the potential solution of reduced GB and the carry forward an investigation of GA and a GC.
So that could continue in tandem. Those two could just still continue in tandem and give us some extra property if need be.
We had done because it is a lot to master plan.
Okay.
To do 3 additional areas. To do 3 areas, Gen 2 is a lot. 3 is would keep us very busy. So that's why we have done and as well, if you did say GB and GA or GC, then our capacity, our demand is met. So we've met our 30-year growth requirements, which is 800 new dwellings.
Okay, but my understanding also was that Greytown we're going to advance quickly with the initial ones are going to be Featherston and Martinborough. So Greytown is going to be a couple of years down the track anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah. Cool. Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, got it. Hey, look, my understanding is if we went with option 1 for Greytown, and during your master planning, it was found that you couldn't drain or stop the water going in that affected area. Why can't we be nimble enough to then change and add in GC at the top there? Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just mulling it over, Jeffy. Is it a problem if we have identified growth areas and then change our mind with regards to a commercial interests that are then purchasing property that we flip-flop on?
So the Mayor's mentioned the context earlier, and accurately, that this is a non-statutory document under the Local Government Act as opposed to RMA. We've got to be able to have some flexibility and respond to what we find out as we go along our pathway, really. So Councillor Jepson's point does have some merit to it, but we've got to, for clarity, we've got to be signalling what areas we see the value in, and to date, our main emphasis has been on the whole GB area.
Right. Okay, Councillor Plymouth, and then Councillor Hay.
Thanks, Alex. Having listened to comments, particularly questions from Rebecca and Lee on this, because they've got a pretty good understanding of the street layout. I'm sort of resting on option 1 GB, but also taking GC out of option 2 to allow some flexibility of development within Greytown. Otherwise, people want to have a bit of a choice which part of town gets developed and where they are. But I'm also quite keen to make sure that we do include GD out at Woodside into the spatial plan, because I'm sure there are going to be people out there that, as the Wairarapa grows, people want to be near there. So, so my preferred thing would be GB option 1, GC, and GD.
Have you got that noted?
I've got that. Yep.
Councillor Hay.
Yes, just a quick question. This is rather rats and mice, but we were also looking at tidying up at the southern end of West Street, which is a mix of commercial and residential, and also the southern end of Cotter Street, which again has a bit of a mix of commercial and residential. And while I understand that the current buildings that are on there may not change for a long time, but that was just an area I'd like noted to clean up if possible.
We've got that included into our district plan review process, which is being discussed tomorrow at that joint committee meeting.
Great,
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Oh, sorry, I've got one other question. So timing for GC, So nothing at all would happen until the Waihini Action Group and floodplain management is, well, not just passed the resolution, but the work is completed, which could be some time. So what are your thoughts around that, timing wise?
That's a very good point, and we should be working closely with Greater Wellington and nudging them along in their work so that we're giving more surety for flood river management outcomes alongside our growth planning. So it's up to us to nudge them along in that work. Councillor Hayes, so you've identified a key point, but that clarification would need to come forth before as part of considering the northern area.
I'd be reluctant to include GC until we have real certainty around the finishing of that project.
I think the planners will be even more risk averse than you, Lee,
Yeah.
in that area.
I
Councillor
know.
Fox. Rebecca.
Thank you. I just wanted to reflect back on the Governor's Green Extension GA comment. I'm not in favour of developing that area more densely for a couple of reasons, and that is because it will be highly visible from Woodside Road and will actually allow the look of town heading out to Woodside, which may or may not be a problem in 30 years, but I'm not sure if that's where we want to go right now. But I just wonder if there's actually not a slightly different conversation to be had, and it might come under the district plan more than this, but actually that those section sizes are sufficient that they could have a second minor dwelling on them. And maybe it's actually about looking at a planning rule for that to be able to be made easier for people. That a second minor dwelling could be put on the property, because most of those sections now I don't think are of a size where that could happen. So that allows for increased density, and it allows for people that might have an elderly family member that might need to come and live with them and wants to live independently.
Very good point, Councillor Fox. We have that rule for the rural zone in the district plan at the moment. That is rural zone.
Yep.
So they are entitled to one main dwelling and one minor dwelling.
Okay, what's the minimum size requirement for that? Sorry.
There's no size requirement to have a main and a minor.
Really?
If you're zoned rural,
It's proximity to the main house.
Yes, yeah.
That's what yeah.
Yeah, as long as you can keep it into close to the main dwelling and within the size limits, within the standards, then it's permitted.
Okay, that's cool. And I just wanted to reflect back on something that that GP said around draining an area. I wasn't thinking about draining an area actually when I was talking about creation of swales and attenuation basins and using some green technology for subdivision. GP, I was actually talking about using that area for what it is, but still being able to use it for residential use in a way that's sympathetic with the environment. And I think we've got a perfect opportunity right in front of us to actually do that, and probably to do it quite well. So I also think that we should have another look at Woodside again, and I'm actually not a fan of looking at GC or GA right at the moment for the reasons that have already been expressed.
Right. Let's just, do you want to answer that?
Would it help if we gave some summative comments on the two options, just in terms of what you...
Yep, okay, at the end,
yep.
Yeah, definitely. I've got your points there, Councillor Fox, and I'm just trying to absorb them on how going forward and whether we're re-looking at everything we've discussed previously. I don't think necessarily we are.
No, we're not. No,
yeah, I'm just trying to get around this, because certainly being sympathetic with the environment and not disrupting water flows is a desired result of the Whaitua process, but also ties in with the water resilience for the south. It
does. Yeah.
Pam, you've been very patient there.
That's all right. I'm just going to throw a curveball in here if I can, please. So in the GB area, you've reduced the size of that because of the flooding, which we've discussed, and 3/4 of that is being taken up by the Orchards project. So that is going to reduce the number of properties and things like that that can go in there. So I was just wondering why I know you've talked about the other area, GC, being with the floodplain and that, but that GA area and Woodside, why we're not promoting those more rather than trying to extend something that's in a flood area.
Right.
Sorry.
Councillor Clenzo, it's more for that medium-term solution, offering up some options in terms of medium time frame solution finding by having the GA and GC as potential options. I think Councillor Fox has made some very key points in terms of a modern council should be looking at swales and stormwater solution finding that is not network pipe based. And so there's an ability to look at that under a full GB. And it is that cautionary point for the north, the GC, as to waiting for more certainty in terms of what arises from flood management thinking. And the GA, although it looks a big area, it's an area that's compromised. And even within that area, what's the percentage of people who will want to open up their land for further development uptake? So that could be further limited, and it sort of echoes one of the first key points that Councillor Plummer raised. Okay, thank you. And I'd like to explore the idea that Councillor Fox has brought in with regard to having a second dwelling on a rural or a lifestyle property. And I think in terms of that, I think that's quite a good option for Martinborough in the lifestyle property where somebody wants to bring a parent or a family member to live on a property within their 4 hectare area or something like that. You're not subdividing the land, but you're allowing the two families to live quite close together. So I'd certainly like to put that into the Martinborough lifestyle properties as well.
Thanks, Pam. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that it already exists in any lifestyle property in the South Wairarapa to have that.
No, it doesn't.
It's only as long as it's rural primary production. If it's rural special, then only one dwelling is permitted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the catch is, isn't it? It's
That's right.
rural special, but it isn't actually rural special.
And we will be looking at those rural special, rural primary production zoning at our district plan.
Well, we're having to do that anyway with regards to MF, Ferry Road, which is rural special, but not Great Plan.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Alistair, you're next.
Thanks, Alex. Russell, I gave you a bit of warning about this one. Could you, Bruce Farley came and gave a very passionate thing about squaring up on the western side of Greytown, and when we were expecting to see a report on yes or no on that. Have you got any comment on that at this stage?
Thanks, Councillor. That one has fallen into the no category, and I'll get Kendall to outline to councillors elements of the thinking there.
Yep, so we did do an assessment of the area. Basically anything to the west is class 1 soils, and it's of a size that still can be productive in some way. we've been avoiding any development in class 1, and that will come into effect with a new national policy statement shortly about avoiding development on those areas.
For those of us that were privy to that conversation, could you describe the area?
Oh, yes.
Is this next to GF where it wiggles in and out and there's a bit of orchard?
If I move my mouse, will you be able to see it?
Yeah.
In this area.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it wraps around here. It is a funny shape, but as you can see, it's a natural boundary currently along here. And we heard a lot in submissions that that hard boundary that currently exists on that side of town should remain, especially because it is class 1, and we have seen in the past residential creep out that way, and it has compromised a lot of the orchard in previous use.
So you don't want to apply the same rules or the thinking we had in Martinborough with regards to inconsistencies in that region?
Our thinking, so we've given it due consideration that Kendall signalling that it's in class 1 soils, which is a big no-no really in terms of a council putting its best thing.
You could be in trouble with the government on that.
And it is still of a size that is considered productive under our district plan. So 4 hectares and above is considered productive.
Whereas the Martinborough inclusion was pretty central to the town and was a straightforward piece of land.
Are you okay with that response, Alistair, even if you may disagree?
Look, I don't have any particular view on this land, but I do understand that Bruce came and gave a very good, he gave a presentation to us. Russell, are we going to respond to Bruce and provide the reasons why you've come up with this conclusion?
We will have to respond to all those that raised, mooted or raised their parcels of land for inclusion or not.
We will get in touch with all submitters.
Okay.
That's good. We had a second submission from Mr. Farley on that as well. So it's important that we do acknowledge that for him.
Yeah. Cool. You're done there, Alistair, with your hand? Yeah, cool. I mean, if I can make a comment, and like, I will, in this, I'll doff my hat to the Greytown councillors, in as much as they know the area possibly better than some. But my thoughts on it are that I kind of agree that GA would have limited benefit because they're new houses and they're new property owners, and they haven't got to the point where they're likely to be demolishing or subdividing or changing their landscaping for that. I feel GC makes sense in as much as it makes it tidier if and when the floodplains ruling is changed. GB I like, but I will agree with the councillors that we need to look at the water attenuation so very carefully. It would be terrible if we allowed development and then all of a sudden everything's under 3 foot of water and everyone's pointing saying, we told you so, right? I'm also mindful that this is something that won't be begun for 3 years. That's correct, isn't it? That we're looking at this as a 3-year time frame before implementation.
We've got master planning to begin 2023, 2024.
2024. So I suppose we have a bit of leeway here with regards to changes. I think it was designed to wait that nothing will be implemented until our next refresh of the spatial plan. I would like to, because of the comments I've had, and I do recall the consultation on Woodside, that possibly with changes and the focus within the regional growth framework, that there may be additional benefits that we want to look at out there.
Yeah,
because what you're labeling is you're supplying sections possibly without any impact on the character and functionality of Greytown itself. So I'd just like to add that to the conversation.
And I think your last point is a key one, and on the right track in terms of transport-based growth planning and provisioning isn't going to go away. It's only going to gain momentum in terms of any council's thinking. So that's why I sort of concur with your thinking in terms of do not easily overlook the potential of Woodside.
I also don't think we could overlook the potential government infrastructural contribution to our towns, given that we are looking at, if it came about, that we might be looking at increased capacity around a transport node. You know, if we're gonna go to that $2.4 billion infrastructure fund, that's the project that will get the regional leadership committee excited.
I will just add that the Woodside Station has been removed from a transport orientated development in the Wellington Regional Growth Framework, just because it is a big extensive project. Yeah, it's a big extensive project.
It can be added very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Okay. So guys, where are we sitting now with regards to our options and how we want to chop and change them? And sorry, you wanted to overview it. So Russell wants to just overview what we've just.
Yeah, I don't want to be remiss and leave anything out in terms of the councillors putting their best thinking forward. But like when you look at option 1 and 2, option 1, simpler approach. You're dealing with one portion of land, do it right, work out what are the further constraints in that area or not. Look, treat it as a blank canvas and do it right. Option 2, you've got 3 parcels of land which you need to deliver all results on. GA is compromised in terms of large lot holdings at the moment with people with their flash homes and may not want to be seeing any further development, and infrastructure provisioning. So it's about having an effective and manageable approach in terms of what option you go with. And for simplicity, GB might be the way, option 1 might be the way to go because it may incur less infrastructure provisioning and all that planning / infrastructure provisioning as a whole.
Right, do we want to do round the table or do you want me to see if I can punt up a resolution that might encapsulate all that and what we've discussed? How would you like to approach this, councillors? Yes, Lee. Alistair, you've got your hand up too, just checking.
Sorry, Russell. Oh, sorry, I'm not. Is it your turn, Alistair?
No, you go, Lee. I think Alistair's lifted up accidentally.
So when we look at our target 800 houses in Greytown, did you include the 180 with the orchard development, Russell and Kendall?
So that hasn't been included in.
So surely that should be quite a key consideration in that 800. Particularly given that some of the people who are moving, the new people buying, I can think of, well, at least 4 examples on the market right now, and they could subdivide the properties. I mean, there's currently 2 4,000 or 2,000 square metre houses or sections for sale at the moment. So I just feel, 180 houses, okay, some people are going to move from, well, it doesn't matter where they're coming from. I think it should be factored into all of our calculations. And I sort of assumed you might have done that, or?
I think we did discuss this in the workshops, and I think there was a figure that was tabled that when you have a retirement village, only 25% of the residents are freeing up land within the district. The rest are coming in because of the retirement village. So I'm not sure whether we took that into account.
I'd quite like to see the evidence of that, because that seems, I mean, when I just think of the people I know who are moving in there, every single one is selling their home. And that's just what I know in Greytown. So I just don't know about that evidence where that 25%.
That came from the regional growth framework when we were specifically discussing retirement homes. So perhaps we do need to see how they came up with that figure.
Because it could well that it's different in the in the South Wairarapa, that the figures that might work in Wellington may not work out here.
Don't forget though, we're going to have a refresh of this prior to implementation. So it might be that we actually do have another weather eye on this at the spatial plan refresh time. With that in mind.
Maybe that can just be noted then. Thank you.
So, Alistair.
Yeah, you asked to sort of to propose to move this along, and I'd come back to what I said earlier. Look, I'd certainly like to propose that we do GB option 1, and listening to what Rebecca and Lee have said, I'd still like to include GC, but subject to the Wahine Action Group report being implemented, being adopted, and bring GD back into the mix.
So if we had a proposal, we could then adopt the combined growth plan for Greytown being GB option 1, GC subject to flood risk mitigation, and advance GD to a shorter time frame if practical. Does that work for you guys? No, that doesn't, Lee. Lee, there's the biggest head shake I've ever seen. So, Lee, I'm just trying to grapple with a proposal here. So, what do you suggest?
I've had a huge amount of feedback on Woodside area to be developed, and certainly people can see the value in the 20-year plus range, but there's a lot of opposition to it, essentially because they see it as significantly changing the nature of the town. So I would prefer, just my preference, but based on a large number of people I've spoken to, for the Woodside to be continued to look at for the 20 plus years. And also regarding GC, let me make sure I got that right, I would just take that one step further, subject to not only the approval by Greater Wellington of the plans, but completion of all works relating to flood mitigation.
Well, I don't think that. I think under planning, the sections would not be released until those works are making it flood safe anyway. So there's a built-in safeguard in that respect.
Yes, but I don't see why we couldn't actually include that in, because
subject to
in concrete.
You're right. I've got no problem with that. I'm just going to, can we increase the whole screen so we can see all the councillors? With regards to GD, so we've got a number of different opinions with regards to the timing of that. All of them, however, are subject to a refresh of this in 3 years' time before implementation. But could you raise your hand if you agree with Lee that Woodside is not an attractive option to include in a resolution? So Lee, you'll be raising your hand on this, puppy.
I better suck it up.
Who would like to remove Woodside from the conversation? Raise your hand. And who would like to keep?
No, I didn't say remove it. I said keep it in the 20 plus year.
That's assumed. So what we are only voting on doing a resolution is the immediate to medium,
yes.
Right? So who would like to keep Woodside in the mix? Cool. Right. So we're building up a resolution now. So we'll keep that in. What about GC? Are we all happy with Lee's concept of subject to the passing or adoption of the Waiahine Flood Management Plan and its implementation? You okay? Raise your hand if you're okay with that. Right, the next one then is, do we want to include GB1 or GB2, big or small?
GB1.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rebecca, GB1. It's going to be subject to all the master planning anyway.
Who raise your hand if you want GB1? And I don't need to ask GB2. Now I'm going to take that resolution, I'm going to punt it back to Russell and say, is this doable?
I think it is.
I think so.
Yeah,
But
I think it's doable.
Cool.
We need, and I think it reflects the good thinking of the councillors.
Yeah.
And with a cautionary note about the northern area. So
I think there's a cautionary note about GB1 as well with regards to successful attenuation of water. But I think I'm going to take that as implied in the resolution.
just the only and it's from your canvassing of the councillors, it's good for us to also get that direction as to the Woodside area as well. I mean, in terms of our longer term thinking, I mean, to us that it's important for us to receive that as well as the other areas. And the only prompt or what I offer up as a thinking point is whether, in our further thinking on spatial planning, whether the Woodside gets activated as we get into it more, whether that comes forward a bit, even if it's by a 5-year period or something, that may be something that we have to put our minds to.
I think since we're looking in our resolution, we are looking at medium term, then I think that's where it sits, but you would have to come back to council anyway if there was something burning wanting to happen there. So, you know, we both understand it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's an option to keep on within the loop, within the medium, not long, right? So councillors, who would like to speak next? Pam.
I wouldn't leave anything implied, Alex, in that I would specify what you actually want to do within that area with regard to the flooding, and probably using Rebecca's words on that, because then there is no misunderstanding later on if somebody's reading or listening to this.
Okay, so we would put in GD, GB1, with subject to successful sympathetic water attenuation strategies. So does that work for you, Rebecca? I think that was sort of your similar wording.
I think that could work. Adequate green engineering.
Okay. Attention to pre-engineering. Yeah.
so what was it?
So subject to successful water attenuation pre-engineering. It's a mouthful. So again, should we go back to the presentation at this point? Have you got anything else, or is that it?
That's it.
That's it. Do we want to do some resolutions based on what we've agreed so far? Cool. Right, so do we have a mover to adopt the combined growth area from Martinborough being A, MA, B, MF, and C, MD? Note that we are leaving out ME. Do we propose? Brendan? No, doesn't want to?
Sorry. Were we not going to combine ME with MD?
ME becomes MD by default by leaving it out of the proposal.
And they just
It defaults down to the density.
Is that specific enough, guys?
Is that specific enough? Yes, it is, according to our planners.
Cool. Thank you.
So who would like to move that? Moved, Jeppy, seconded. Pam, all those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. So when the next one is pretty simple, to adopt, do we have a proposer to adopt the combined growth area for Featherston being A, area FA, B, area FB, and C, area FC? A mover? Lee. Second, moved by
if no one from Featherston wants to, I will.
Seconded by Garrick. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? All those abstaining?
Did we actually complete, because Councillor Garrick
Sorry, say that again, Rebecca. I missed all that.
You've just frozen up the most important part.
Can't hear you, Brenda.
You've broken
she's
up.
frozen. She's frozen. I'm gonna preempt that she may be discussing whether or not there was an area at the bottom, and I'm going to go up to that map that you discussed, Garrick, regarding the attenuation.
We're talking about 35 Donald, the space FB, which was previously called FD.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to do, I think we agreed at the resolution point was to leave that and revisit it subject to plans changing where possible.
Well, was it plans changing, or was it worrying about the flood zone? That was my point.
Well, that's the flood zone plans changing.
Correct.
Yeah, so we'll revisit that. Oh,
so can we just wait till Brenda comes back? She's obviously just logged out and logged back in again. She had a question, so let's just wait till she comes back.
Yeah, cool. Okay, take a quick 2-minute breather.
Yes, Alex, I agree. That's what we're talking about. If it changes, then we revisit.
Sorry, I missed that, Garrett.
Thank you.
Do you want to push mute just for a second? Lee's back. We haven't seen Brenda come back. I'm wondering whether it might be catastrophic. We still have a quorum, and we have had indications from. Sorry, Lee.
I've just texted Brenda, and she's just said to me, wanted to know if we resolved the issue around Donald's Creek.
Yeah.
And then she went on to say internet challenge.
Right. So we'll carry on. Thank you for that update. So I will go back to, I think we discussed that Donald's Creek area, we will be advised if the regional council floodplain plans change, and we may have a chat at that point regarding the spatial plan. But until such time as that happens, we're not going to consider it in this resolution. So we move it to I think we've already moved that, haven't we, Garrick? So
yeah, I was going to say, it refers to it on page 48 of Stella, just so we're all on the same page.
You're trying to trick me halfway through a resolution?
No. Just so we're all on the same. We could even quote it's in Stella, but because we're talking about Donald's Creek and Donald's Street, they're different.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't Donald Street. Yeah. So which is Donald's Creek, though, isn't it? In part.
It is. Yep.
Cool. So we have the resolution as read that we're going to adopt as written down there. So A, FA, B, FB, and C, FC. Moved by Councillor Plymouth, seconded by Councillor Ems. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. And then we get to the tricky one, and I'm going to get Suzanne to read this back. Oh. We'll just let Brenda in. She's just arriving now. We'll just wait for her to start moving. Yay! Cool. You haven't missed much, but we did pass the resolution as read for Featherstone.
Did we resolve the issue around Donald's Creek that Garrick raised? We did.
Yeah, certainly. We chatted about that we would be revisiting it if the regional council floodplain maps changed.
Sweet, thank you.
Cool.
Alex, could we just Brenda was out when we voted, so we've got to record how she was going to go.
The vote's recorded just for that little period that Brenda was. Would you like us to revisit the vote, or it was passed as written down? Would you like us to revisit that, Brenda?
Well, yeah, well, I agree with it. So
Cool.
if that can be recorded or added.
Yep, cool.
Excuse me, Alec, can we just do another all in favour, say aye, so Brenda's present and it's in the official minutes?
Okay, so we have a resolution, so I'm going to reverse. So I've got to go through. Do we have a motion to reverse the previous resolution regarding Featherston land?
You can
move.
just change it. If 75% of them agree, you can just change it.
So raise your hand if you agree that we can re-vote on that. Right, good, we've got our 75%. So the motion is that we adopt the combined growth area for Featherston being A, FA, B, FB, and C, FC, moved by Councillor Plymmer, seconded by Councillor Ems. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those
Alex,
against.
I'm happy if Brenda would like to move it. I'm quite happy to.
Don't start this. All those against. The motion is carried again. Hey, and now I'm going to read this from Suzanne. So, do we have a mover to adopt the combined growth area for Greytown to include option GB option 1, subject to successful water attenuation pre-engineering. GC, subject to passing of the Waihini Flood Management Plan and its implementation. And G to advance GD to a shorter time frame than 20 years. We have a mover for that. Councillor Hayes, seconded Councillor Plymmer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against? All those abstaining? Brenda, have we got a... Brenda, we didn't see your vote on that one.
Lost.
Anyway, the motion is carried one way or another, but Brenda, if you could record let us know your vote, because you were freezing there intermittently. Cool.
Thumbs up if you agree.
Yeah. Look, guys, thank you very much. Thank you. So I now close this council meeting. So we do need to have two others, sorry. So do we have so it's recommendation 6, and I'll read it, that it supports the development of an infill design guide for existing mid-residential areas in Martinborough and Greytown. Russell, do you want to just speak to this resolution to make sure that everyone's clear on what we're asking?
Yes, so that's like we did touch upon the relative merit or not of design guidance, but we're still raising to council's attention the importance of it in terms of the bulk of Martinborough and the bulk of Greytown to more clearly signal to developers expected outcomes in terms of design for the mid-residential that can happen in Martinborough and Greytown. So that's basically the premise of why we see value in it.
Cool. Has everyone got an extreme objection to this? I mean, I think it makes sense, and we have discussed character retention a lot. Alistair?
I just think it's we haven't had a chance to have a discussion about what it is and what it would implement and so on and so forth. I think Russell just give us a bit more time to decide with this, and perhaps actually let us know what are we talking about in detail. And you've got plenty of time. That doesn't need to be done today.
You okay with that? Will we put it through to the next? So if you could distribute some information, we can put it onto the next agenda, the mayor's report, possibly to get that passed, so that you've got time to absorb it and ask questions of officers. And would you like to do? Sorry.
The only other point, adding on to Councillor Plymmer's guidance around it, is that it's a topic for discussion at district plan review. So the wise heads around the table for that. It's going to get kicked around a bit as a topic for the district plan review with mixed councillors from all different councils and senior advisors in the room.
Cool. I see no problem. So we're gonna if everyone's okay, we will park that. Pam?
Oh, sorry, I was going to ask, are you talking about infill like you were proposing for the ME area in Martinborough? Is that what you're talking about? But it's at selected areas that developers would want to move, that they may be able to do that.
It's for normal anticipated medium density that can happen as of now in the towns.
So we're trying to, I suppose what you're saying is you'd like a tool to ensure that you don't get really ugly, inconsistent with development within a particular area that's important to us.
Yes, and as we get application by application, we can go away, and James or I or Kendall can say to them, these are the expected planning outcomes we want to see for your mid-sized development or 3 units, and it's that clarity of it. It helps with clarity of outcome.
So what we're going to do is get Kendall and Russell to give us some more information, and we'll bring it to another council meeting to pass so that we can really nut this through. But I don't think we have an issue with number 7, which is that the master planning and structural planning will proceed to implement the spatial plan, which is the whole point of what we're doing here. Is that correct? So, okay, Pam, you have a question on that?
No, I was going to move it.
Oh, good. That was quick. Yeah, Lee seconded. So the recommend a proposer to note the master planning and structural planning will proceed to implement the spatial plan, moved by Councillor Colenso and seconded by Councillor Hay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, the motion is carried. Thank you for your time, guys. We got through it. And good discussion, I must say, as well. And I declare the meeting closed, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Russell and Kendall and James.
Thank you, Russell and Kendall. And I'm